Hey gang, with Invictus right around the corner, I felt like it might be a good time to jump into what to expect, what we know is coming, what we think is coming, and what's probably not coming. That's a lot of coming in one sentence. Let's get this. Let's break this one down into, let's say, 4 categories. The sale and the event itself, which I got the page up right here. Things we know are dropping on us in Invictus. Things that might or have been rumored to be dropping on us. And things that have been in the rumor mill that probably aren't going to drop on us. So with that said, let's get into it. So first up, just a quick overview, because a lot of new folks have just found this weird ass alpha project, and CIG in their infinite wisdom long ago decided that FOMO was the way to go with sales. So while every ship in the game is flyable, the majority of the ships are only available to buy at certain times of the year. The biggest of these is IAE, the Intergalactic Aerospace Expedition, which should be intragalactic, right? Since it's only in one galaxy, I think. Anyway, that one's near the end of the year, and pretty much every ship that we know about is for sale during that one, with very few exceptions. The other, well, that's Invictus, and that's coming up pretty quick here. Let's see, in 10 days, 2 hours, and 21 minutes as of the recording of this thing. Invictus is a little more focused, at least on the surface, as it's primarily combat ships, but CIG stretches combat ships pretty broadly, so sometimes ships that you wouldn't expect to pop up are here. So while you don't get access to every ship like you would at IAE, you get access to a lot more than you would expect. This can be useful because most of the biggest and most expensive ships available are typically combat ships. You can upgrade the ship you bought initially via starter pack with an upgrade. These used to be called cross chassis upgrades, or CCUs, and most of the community still calls them that. But if you look on the website, it's under upgrades, which is right here. So if you go to the pledge store and you click on other, you can sort of see that you've got all of these options up here. At the top is ship upgrades, and that takes you to this screen. And so it defaults to, these are all the ships you own over here. And then you can select a ship, and then these are all the ships that are available to buy. Now, one of the neat things about this screen is that you can close this, select all ships, and now it has all ships regardless of whether they're for sale or not, and their cost. So you can look down at any random ship down here and get the price of them, even if they aren't for sale now, which is useful because then you can start pricing things out. Now, during these big sales, Invictus and IAE, you have access to more ships and can upgrade to a ship that normally wouldn't be available until the end of the year. But CIG also runs some discounted packages during this time, and you can make a CCU chain from whatever ship you have to one of those big ships and save a great deal of money. Just a made up example, let's say that you have an Aurora, which this is the starter Aurora right here, but you want a Perseus. An Aurora has a value of about $30. A Perseus has a value of $675. If you have that money to burn, you're going to be shelling out $655? $645. Yeah, that's math. If you have that money to burn, hey, good on you, knock yourself out. But for those who don't, sometimes you can string together a bunch of discounted upgrades for smaller ships and get that Perseus for considerably less. So you might have something that goes from an Aurora to a Mantis to a Constellation, and you gradually build up this chain. So that's why they're called chains. And then you end up saving a whole bunch of money as opposed to shelling out $645. Now you're spending like maybe $125 on this chain, a considerably good savings for a ship that size. I can't guarantee you'd get a benefit like that. But this kind of chain game is kind of a meta game for a lot of the power users in Star Citizen, and some people have kind of made it their focus. So the info runners are the experts at creating these chains, and I highly recommend checking out their channel if you want to do this, if you haven't already, and dropping in on their Discord, and I'll have links to both in the down below bits. You can also melt a ship or ships that you aren't using to buy something you do want. But I'll stress right now, be careful. If you melt the ship you have with your game package and buy a ship that doesn't come with a game package, you won't be able to play the game. So be very careful with that. But other than that, if you bought one of the initial concepts that comes with extra gear like helmets or a suit or a gun or something like that, or more important to most people is LTI, lifetime insurance, that will carry forward into the next ship, which a lot of people will buy a small ship with LTI with the whole thought of buying a big ship that was concept sold years ago and getting LTI on it. Okay, so that is a quick, broad, shallow dive into what Invictus is. Let's get into some speculation. For sure, there's only one new ship we know will be an Invictus, and that's the Starlancer TAC, which is right here. The Starlancer is a pretty solid ship. The Max is the one that we have in the game right now, but I'd say it's a hair too large to be a solo ship. Not that you can't solo it, just that you're leaving a lot on the table if you do. You're not really taking advantage of all the things this ship can do. And they're slightly smaller craft. They're more conducive to solar play than this monster. With the TAC, with the 2 additional turrets, this is even more true. If you're regularly dropping with 3 to 5 people and do a lot of combat ops, the TAC could be the ship for you. It's kind of a mini Carrack with a tiny hangar, which you can see right here, that can fit a Fury, looks like barely, and a med bed. I think this thing will end up being like the Redeemer or the Valkyrie, with a solo player grabbing it because they like all those guns, and then being disappointed when they find out they're going to need other people to actually make use of all those guns. And yeah, one day we'll have blades, but I still say that will be more limited than most people think. That said, we're likely going to know for sure sooner than later, as we're getting some kind of blades, AI blades, in the next patch. But anyways, there's a link to my previous vid on this subject here in the upper right. And as for ships that we know are in Invictus, that's it. Of course, we know that CIG is dropping at least one other ship. If rumors are to be believed, maybe more. So there are a few ships that are being rumored to be dropping into Invictus. As usual, some of these are a little more likely than others. Generally, for whatever reason, Invictus always seems to draw some wild rumors. Typically, these tend to be overblown or just delusional. And CIG will release 1 or 2 ships. That's what they almost always do, a small one and then like a medium fighter or something like that. If it's 2, that's usually something big and something small. I always hear that they're going to drop an enormous warship every single year. And every single year we end up with something light fighter sized or small ground vehicle or something that might be the size of a Valkyrie. So with that in mind, there's a handful of vehicles that seem likely, but keep in mind when I say that, it means that there will probably just be one of the following and not all of the following. Maybe 2. Maybe. But probably 1. That's enough caveats. Let's get into them. First up, we're probably likely getting this guy, which is obviously built on the Guardian platform. A lot like the variants of the Fury, this one's probably going to be the missile variant. The info runners seem to think this thing will carry a pair of enormous size 10 torpedoes. And I guess I was expecting more of a big ass missile spammer, but the torp idea is probably more accurate. Really heavy fighters should generally punch up and then be vulnerable to lighter fighters. So some big torps would actually make a lot more sense than a lot of smaller missiles. Next up is this Gray Cat thingy, which is rumored to be the NTC, because Gray Cat is all about the alphabet soup for their naming conventions. This is probably connected to this image from the sneak peeks, which is obviously upside down. I am pretty sure this is not the bottom, that this was supposed to be the other way around. Rumors have this thing as an APC or a command and control thing, or maybe a missile tank, which would be a weird step for Greycat though. And I think if it does come with missiles, this would be the first Greycat vehicle we've had that actually comes with weapons. Usually the weapon stuff is more of a tumbril thing. But anyways, pretty safe bet this one is in the mix. So that brings us up to 3 new ships for Invictus batch, which is already starting to push over the max they usually have for this sale. But even so, there's a few more rumors out there. They're at least a possibility, so I'll throw them up next. A lot of people seem to think the Paladin or a Valkyrie variant is about to drop. And I keep hearing about the Asgard, which is supposed to be a big anvil vehicle mover to compete with the Hercules. I think it's just supposed to move 1 tonk, but there you go. That thing's out there somewhere. Granted, something like that does make sense for Invictus, but I just don't think it's super likely with the other new ships they're dropping. Still, tonally, it fits the sale, so it's at least a possibility. I don't think the Paladin is quite ready yet, unless they were already making it before the concept sale. So I think the Paladin's a long shot, but not an absolutely not type of thing, but unlikely. Same thing, unless it's solely a concept sale, I don't think the Asgard will be in the mix yet. In the same vein, there's always a chance they drop another suit on the Atlas platform. And this is the Walker version of the Atlas platform, not the big driving platform. Maybe a military version, but even a salvager would make sense. I was honestly kind of surprised they didn't drop the salvager variant at the same time as they dropped the Geo. It's a pretty safe bet this won't be the vaunted Titan suit, because that military power armor isn't made by Argo. That doesn't mean that the company that makes it can't be retconned into a military arm of Argo, but that seems unlikely at this point in time. Personally, I think they'll hold off on the Titan suit until they have Squadron 42 released, a lot like what they're doing for the Idris, but I'll get to that in a minute. That said, we might get a civilian knockoff version. It's certainly possible that some armed variant of the Atlas drops into our hand. Unlikely, but possible. Finally, we know they're working on a heavy fighter that I believe is RSI. I think that was in the ship preview thing they had a few weeks ago. Something bigger than a Scorpius, in other words, and more in the Vanguard size range. Again, don't hold your breath. I'm sure it's in the works, but I wouldn't count on it being released this year, or at least not released for this year's Invictus. So let's move on to things that I'm almost certain won't be in Invictus, but people have been saying have a good chance to make it in. So caveat here, I just want to lead off by saying I could easily be wrong and surprised if one of these drops on us, but I see the chances of these coming in is very, very slim, to the point of being almost non-existent. So first up, and I've been hearing this one a lot, is the Idris. A lot of people seem to think they're going to be dropping the Idris P on us. Now, for those of you who don't know, the P is a version that doesn't have the railgun and trades out, I think it's either the missile or torp room for more cargo space. Maybe it's the ammo room for the railgun. That would make sense since it's sans railgun. But anyway, CIG has long said we're not getting the Idris until Squadron 42 is out. I think that includes the Idris P. Of course, dropping the P could be a way they could throw Idris owners a bone without spoiling the Squadron 42 version. Still, I say it's real unlikely though. Next up, and I hope I'm wrong on this, is the Ironclad. I really, really hope I'm wrong on it, but I just don't see this thing dropping yet. And yeah, I know, as far as big ships go, it's not super complicated. It's mostly empty space with a pretty simple working area and an attached command module. But still, I'd look for this one later in the year. That said, maybe Drake surprises us. And here are two that kind of hold hands in my mind. I'm just using the max here as a holding place. And that's the Starlancer BLD and the CSV FM. And this is what the CSV SM looks like. The FM is the builder version that comes with 2 drones that they showed off at SitCon last year. Yeah, I think the first real tier of crafting and building will be attached to a bigger patch than 4.11, maybe 4.2, maybe 4.3, maybe 5.0, who can say? But I think CIG is slow walking building and engineering for now in favor of game stability. So these two are at least a few months off if I had to put money on it. I also heard the Perseus is in the mix, but a lot like the Polaris last year, I think the Perseus is more likely at IE or SitCon than it is at Invictus. Finally, the Apollo is another one that I've seen pop up in the rumor mill, but like building and engineering, I think CIG will hold that flying health clinic for a patch where they can introduce the next tier of medical gameplay. And that's probably going to be its own big number patch and not 4.11. The real question is which of those 3 game loops they'll drop first, engineering, medical, or crafting and building. What do you think? Let me know in the down below bits, or just let me know if you agree with me, or if you think I shot something down that's definitely dropping, or if I missed something entirely. And that's all I have for this one, gang. Catch me next time.